Let us listen to the prelude from our music director, David Chapman, Art is Calling to Me by Victor Herbert.
Mm.
Good morning to all, and a special hello to any visitors with us this morning. I am Polly Pettit, your worship associate. My pronouns are she, her. I am part of a team that works with service leaders and staff to craft and produce our Zoom services. We strive to be a welcoming congregation. We are from all over. Our families have come from different countries. Among us, we have a range of sexualities, a range of shapes and sizes, appearances, and identities. We have differing physical abilities. We have different theologies and philosophies, and different ways of expressing ourselves creatively. We are so glad you chose to join us here this morning. And speaking of here, we acknowledge that the land where our church building stands is the ancestral home of the Piscataway people who settled this region thousands of years ago, extending from the Potomac River towards the Chesapeake Bay. Whatever brought you online this morning, welcome to our worship service. We are recording on Facebook Live and Zoom. You also have a YouTube channel. We do, and our subscription will unlock some additional features for us, and you can view past services there. Please use the link in the chat if you want to subscribe. And speaking of chat, please post there the number of people viewing from your screen this morning. We'd love to have you participate from your home in singing, sharing in the chalice lighting, and sharing joys and sorrows in the chat. Just remember to remain muted unless you're part of the service. And to get to know us better, please send your contact info to engagement@pbuuc.org. We have a couple of announcements this morning. Please join Chris McCann, our religious educator, in the main room after service today for the third part of our three-part Come to Practice conversation. Today, we will be asking the question, why do we come to practice? Joining is easy. Simply decline the invitation to join a breakout room and you will remain in the main room. And save the date. Our annual meeting for 2021 is on Sunday, June 6th from 12 noon to 2 p.m. For the second year, we will meet via Zoom to discuss the affairs of the church and to elect members to leadership positions. The link to the Zoom meeting will be posted in PBUUC's online calendar of events, along with documents related to topics to be discussed. And now, Reverend Lynn Strauss will lead us in the call to worship.
Thank you, Polly. Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you. Our call to worship is always meant to be a call to pay attention to all of life, life that is full of joy and sorrow, life that is radiant and hidden. The words I offer this morning are from 19th century writer and poet George Eliot. And the feel of this poem for me is that it evokes the intimacy that we experience when we do offer our full attention to life. He writes, "If we had keen vision of all that is ordinary in human life, it would be like hearing the grass grow or the squirrel's heartbeat, and we should die of that roar, which is the other side of silence." Welcome to worship at Paint Branch Unitarian Universalist Congregation today. Let us take a moment to greet one another by unmuting, by waving, by smiling, by saying hello. And don't forget to scroll to the second and third screen so that you can see all of us who are here together to celebrate. Good morning.
Hi, all.
Yes.
Hello, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for
Good
being.
morning.
Greetings, everybody.
If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands.
Clap, clap.
If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, then don't be afraid to show it. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Yay. Thank you. And now for our chalice lighting, John Bartoli will light our chalice. John is a member of Paint Branch since 1993, and he has served on the board and the nominating committee and in many other ways. He is now retired, and he is a writer, journaling, and a poet. Thank you, John.
Good morning. I'm sorry for that little stumble there. Yes, it's a beautiful day, and I'm here to light the chalice this morning. But before I light the chalice, I wanted to light you all up with a short poem by myself that I think fits well with the idea of a chalice being lit and a start to it. It's called Got a Light. It's a dark, cold world. Any spark of light that we come across is precious. Guard it from the wind and the cold. Blow on it till it glows hot. Feed it till it grows, till it starts feeding itself. The only flame that nourishes us is the one that we gently nourish ourselves. From the tiniest of sparks, big bonfires are made. So, and now, unison chalice lighting. We light the chalice to celebrate Unitarian Universalism. This is the church of the open mind, the helping hands, and the radiant spirit. Encendamos esta cáliz para celebrar el unitarismo universalismo. Esta es la iglesia de la mente abierta, de las manos amigas, del amor del corazón y del espíritu radiante.
Good morning, my good people. I'm Chris McCann, your religious educator, and my pronouns are she and her. It's a delight to be together on this unusually cool morning, and you'll forgive me if my teeth chatter a little because it's really cold up here. This morning, I wonder, what are you really good at? So good that maybe you've turned it into an art form. Maybe gardening, cooking, training dogs. Whatever it is, I'm so proud of you for honing your skills and bringing your art to life in the world. I also wonder, what are you very bad at? What are you very bad at that brings you joy, partially because you're so bad at it? Like you've made an art form out of the terribleness. I am an awful singer, but I get in my car and crank up the music and belt it out. I'm not a great dancer, but I do have epic dance parties in my kitchen. I'm a good writer, and sometimes that's a problem. When I was about 23, I told my grandfather, another good writer, that I was having a terrible writer's block and was considering giving up the whole thing. He nodded sagely, as grandfathers do, and said the problem is that you're too concerned about the outcome. Let's find a way to change your mind. Quietly, he began to gather art supplies, canvases, paints, brushes. He was also a terrific artist, and he packed those up for me. I declined his generous offer and said, nope, that's not for me. I'm no good at it. I can't paint because I can't draw. He said, nonsense, like grandfathers do. That's like someone saying they can't write because they can't spell. What you need is a creative outlet that is nothing but joy. No mastery, no practice, no angst. Just go put color on canvas with gleeful abandon. And so I did. And the joy that poured forth from me creating art for its own sake was magical. It opened all the creative doors and made the things I am good at even more accessible. I still do it, and I'm still bad at it. And here's an example of my terrible art. I'm not worried about the outcome, and that changes everything. So what are you really bad at that brings you joy? I hope you'll consider approaching it again and again with no thought of mastery, just gleeful abandon.
Thank you, Chris. My family's bloodline had a vein of eclectic artistic talent. My mother was an amateur artist, amateur meaning one who loves. She had an inherent sense of color and shadow, shape, and balance. Although she never finished her art degree, she loved drawing and painting, which came easily to her. It brought her great joy. When I was a child, she was part of a small group of visual artists who rented studio space to draw and paint together every week. She especially loved painting with watercolor, a particularly difficult medium. She also did what she referred to as chalk talks. She would take a large drawing pad, charcoals, and an easel into schools or community groups and speak on a topical subject as she drew illustrations, one spontaneous sketch on each page. The ease that she could make every stroke came from years of practice and enjoyment. My sister and I loved our crayons and chalk and paint when we were growing up. My mother didn't have much use for coloring books that required keeping your colors within the lines. She encouraged us to draw freely. I don't know what to do.
You're unfrozen.
Polly, you're back on. Start at the beginning of that paragraph.
Okay, thank you. My sister and I loved our crayons, chalk, and paint when we were growing up. My mother didn't have much use for coloring books that required keeping your colors within the lines. She encouraged us to draw freestyle and paint with a lot of color. I loved art as a child. Those boxes of Crayolas with exotic names like chartreuse and magenta were magical to me. I spent many happy hours creating visual stories. But at some point, I just never got any better, and it didn't seem to entice me any longer. Meanwhile, my brother was passionate about music. He could play a song by ear and sang beautifully. He would eventually become a minister of music at a Presbyterian church. My sister graduated with a degree in design. She made beautiful jewelry and loved teaching art to kids. That fuzzy bear and lion are from a children's art class that she taught at a zoo. At times, I felt like the artistic gene pool ran dry before it got to me. It took me some time for me to realize that I didn't have to actually produce a film to be creative, and that art form, as a motion picture researcher, I can tell good stories by finding the best existing footage to bring a historical story to life. My proudest creation is, of course, my daughter, Jocelyn. She inherited artistic genes from both sides of the family, since Peter's brother was a painter and a writer. But we never knew what form Jossie's creativity would take. As a very young child, she would rather move the furniture around to create a new realm than to play with kids' toys. One day in her teens, she told us that she had been decorating her shoes. "That's wonderful," we said, thinking that she would reveal a pair decorated with flowers or clouds, or maybe something goth. And then she showed us the shoes. What kind of color tornado was spinning inside her head that had exploded onto her shoes? Soon it was not only shoes, it was lampshades and telephones and every wall and ceiling of her room. There was no blank space that couldn't morph into a beautiful creation. In time, the shoes gave way to another creative passion, cooking. Jocelyn became the type of chef who can look inside a fridge or a pantry and voila, something exquisitely delicious will appear on the table. We're glad that we sometimes get to eat her creations and that in my life are more important than ever. I try to garden with plants as a palette of color, texture, and balance. I read books and listen to music and view art. And the most challenging way that I find my muse is to write reflections for services as a worship associate. That has opened some veins of memory and belief and exploration that's been tremendously rewarding. I highly recommend it. In this last year of a pandemic, I've missed seeing the artwork on the walls of our meeting house. But we've experienced wonderful music and dance and video productions via Zoom together. The ingenuity shown by the people in this church has truly amazed me. We're all coloring outside the lines. May we continue to do so. And now Lynn Lewison, one of our pastoral care associates, will lead us in joys and sorrows.
Good morning. As Polly said, my name is Lynn Lewison, and I'm a pastoral care associate here at Paint Branch, along with Kathy Bartolomeo and Jim Flaherty. As we gather in community, we carry life's hurts and its great joys. We think it is helpful to provide an opportunity for attendees to share these joys and sorrows. So during this online service, I invite you to share your joys and sorrows in the chat, and I will lead a meditation after the intonation. And now, David Chapman will play Melodies Keep Going Through My Mind by Johannes Brahms. Thank you, David. Now let us take some time to acknowledge all that has been shared, as well as those joys and sorrows that remain unshared and yet are on our minds. In this quiet time, may our hearts open to hope and healing. May our minds open to hope and possibility. May we hold these and one another in love and kindness, so that this congregation may be a source of strength and comfort, courage and hope in the days and weeks ahead.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Polly. Thank you, David. Thank you, everyone, for crafting such a beautiful experience together. Something we do every single week is make art. We call it worship. I have 2 readings to offer before I begin my sermon. The first reading is by one of my favorite authors, Annie Dillard. And she has a book about writing, a very thin little book called The Writing Life. And she muses throughout the book with quotes from artists of visual arts as well as the written art form. So the first one, well, it's a collection. So I'll just read notes from Annie Dillard. Art must enter the body. A painter cannot use paint like glue or screws to fasten down the world. The tubes of paint are like fingers. They work only if inside the painter, the neural pathways are wide and clear to the brain. Cell by cell, molecule by molecule, atom by atom, part of the brain changes physical shape to accommodate and fit the paint. Words from Paul Klee. You adapt yourself, Paul Klee said, to the contents of the paint box. Adapting yourself to the contents of the paint box is more important than nature and its study. The painter does not fit the paints to the world. He most certainly does not fit the world to himself. He or she fits himself or herself to the paint. A well-known writer was asked by a student, "Do you think I could be a writer?" Well, the writer said, "I don't know. Do you like sentences?" I asked a joyful painter once how he came to be a painter. He said, "I liked the smell of paint." And finally, after Michelangelo died, someone found in his studio a piece of paper on which he had written a note to his apprentice. It was in the handwriting of his old age. And it said, "Draw, Antonio, draw. Antonio, draw, and do not waste time." Thus end the words of the artists. My second reading is by poet David White, and he draws the artwork and the art experience to a religious place. It is called Faith. I want to write about faith, about the way the moon rises over cold snow night after night. Faithful, even as it fades from fullness, slowly becoming that last curving and impossible sliver of light before the final darkness. But I have no faith myself. I refuse it the smallest entry. Let this then, my small poem, like the new moon, slender and barely open, be the first prayer that opens me to faith. And so ends the reading by David White, W-H-Y-T-E. We are all artists. I love books. I love them so much that I visit them sometimes. I get down on the floor and I look at the titles and the authors and I whisper their names to myself and I touch the dusty covers. I am so blessed to know these books. I am so privileged to call them mine. The thoughts and stories and images woven with such haunting and illuminating words by these authors still move me to silent tears. They have upheld me for years and years. My bookshelves are altars holding sacred texts, mysteries, and enchantments that have formed me. The wisdom of mere mortals pointing toward the holy. Hush a moment and hear my teachers, my priests, my rabbis, my spirit guides. I have kneeled and touched the holy. I offer a sample of what I have devoured, what has fed me. Titles, authors, words, creating a part of who I now am. Titles, I'm just going to read a list. Just let the words sink in. Maybe you know some of them. Soul food, faithful and virtuous night, the bluest eye, grapes of wrath, between the world and me, the Poisonwood Bible, Racism 101, If the Oceans Were Ink, A Feather on the Breath of God, Jude the Obscure, Buddhism of the Heart, The Prisoner of Azkaban, Annie Dillard, Denise Levertov, June Jordan, Joy Harjo. There weren't many books in my growing up home, but the public library was only a few blocks away. My library card was a ticket to ride. And ministry is a privilege in so many ways. How lucky that part of my work is to read. Writing, too, is a significant part of a minister's calling. Early in my ministry, a colleague and friend, much to my surprise, collected some of my newsletter columns, poems, and prayers, and printed them collected them in a small book she made for me. I had no idea that I was making art with words. In my family, each of us kids, there were 5, had an assigned role. You know how that can happen in families. Polly explained some of that earlier. My older brother got to be the musician. I was the reader and the writer. One sister, as a teenager, created a beautiful wardrobe for herself. My other sister was a drawer and a painter. And my youngest brother was good at building things and making people laugh. I kept to my writing lane and limited my creativity to writing. But I always longed to be closer to my father, who was a professional musician. And so I wrote this poem once, never was able to share it with him. It's called If Only I Could Mourn My Father. It was written after he died. If only I had been a shiny, shapely Gibson guitar, then my father would have held me gently on his knee. He would have strummed my heartstrings and filled all my empty spaces with harmonies of love. If only I had fit inside that red velvet lined case, I would have left small presents in the secret compartment that opened with a soft pull tab. I might have left a silver dollar or a cat's eye marble or a stick of juicy fruit gum, things my father would have found wonderful and wondered at and thought about and treasured. If only I had been a precious, irreplaceable guitar, he would have taken me everywhere with him. He would have carried me on all of his out-of-town gigs and shown me off to his friends. I laugh when I think how I would have been held by his strong hands and joined to the passion and beauty in the turn of his wrist. If only I had been a guitar, I would have been part of my father's everyday world, part of the melody resonating with every beat of his heart. I would enter the late night silence with him, and together we would make beautiful music, and he would prize me above all else. So you see the intimacy of art. When I had children of my own, I discovered I was more than a writer. I was a creator. We all know women's work, especially parenting, is not especially valued. Yet we also know that cooking, keeping house, gardening, getting a toddler to eat or a teenager to get enough sleep, or keeping everyone happy on a long car trip, or mentoring relationship and love is art. And a parent gets to practice relationship making, their art, every day. If there is one good thing to come out of a year of quarantine, it may be that more of us have discovered our hidden art lane or have spent more time in already beloved creative endeavors. Perhaps you had a dream a year ago, a dream of using COVID time well. Maybe you started out with the intention of learning to play a guitar or write your memoir or build a playhouse, but you got stalled somehow by how hard everything was this year, stalled by illness, loneliness, anxiety, economic challenges, fear, grief. There was so much and so little this year. Early on, I tried learning to play harmonica, but well, never mind. I didn't fall in love with my harmonica. And love is a big part of art. As with any kind of love, art is both an inside and an outside experience. I bring to my books and my writing, my ministry and my parenting, an intimate part of myself, a fear, a question, an old hurt, a sense of quest. I wonder, what is this wonderful writer going to teach me? I wonder if these characters are at all like me, whether this adventure of theirs will spur adventure in me. I wonder how my family will continue loving one another. I wonder how religious community will deepen at my church. I bring my inside self to the outside of all that is story, all that builds community, all that is art. My premise this morning is that we are all artists. Some of us just may not know it yet. We are all living the story of our own lives. We are all bringing our inside self, our conscious and unconscious self, and offering it to the world every day, whether we name it or not. We are in relationship with all that is outside of our inside and all that is holy. Unitarian minister Ralph Waldo Emerson once wrote, "No one suspects the days to be God's." What might be our response to this day if we knew this day to be a God, a powerful, mysterious, beauty-filled gift? This day is yours, given to you as a gift. What will you do with this one precious day? I am a religious humanist. I believe there is something of the divine in every human, and that the mystery and energy of life itself is divine. Unitarian Universalists tend to agree that the world, the night sky, the snow-capped mountains, birds, trees, animals, all that share this planet, we can agree that nature is divine. We have a bit more trouble, I think, accepting, seeing, affirming the divine within each person, including ourselves. I believe within each of us is a seed of the divine. Have you noticed, perhaps if you're an elder, or if you have sat with a dying loved one, or if you're companioning someone with a serious, at times life-threatening illness, have you noticed in them or in yourself that the closer we move toward death, the more we see the shimmering world? French paleontologist and priest Teilhard de Chardin, after traveling in China in the 1920s, wrote these words: "Throughout my life, during every minute of it, the world has been gradually lighting up and blazing before my eyes until it has come to surround me entirely lit up from within." Throughout my life, during every minute of it, the world has been gradually lighting up and blazing before my eyes until it has come to surround me entirely lit up from within. According to Rabbi Isaac Luria, God contracted himself, the divine essence, and withdrew to make room for a finite world. The divinity was poured out into huge vessels, but the holy light was so full of power that it burst the vessels, and the sparks of divinity splintered and scattered across the earth. Sparks of holiness fell into the depths, and we see only the broken shards that are left to our bleak world. God is hidden, exiled, divine light entrapped. The spark of goodness lives within things waiting to be revealed. The sparks scatter everywhere, Martin Buber wrote, and they cling to material things as in sealed up wells. They crouch in substances as in caves that have been bricked up. They inhale darkness and breathe out fear. They flutter about in the movements of the world, waiting to be set free. The divine spark in us and in all of life is waiting to be set free. And this is the artist's work. The movement, the rhythm, the word, the color, the shaping, the sculpture, the love that reveals itself out of the silence, that is art. And thus we are all artists. What if the whole human race nurtured its divine seed within? What if the whole human race embraced its capacity to birth beauty, love, and peace? Our imagination is our greatest creation tool. It allows us to imagine unseen existences, hidden shards of light. It allows us to have faith in that which we cannot yet see or hear or know. The blank page, the canvas, the newborn child, the silence before the first note, the tableau waiting for the first dance step, the rough wood or fresh clay, wait only for our hands, our eyes and imagination, the tools of our creativity, the height and depth and whole of life itself, wait for us to touch it with love, to free it from our inattention. Creativity stirs hope. That's why we love art so much. Throughout history, art has reflected and critiqued culture, not just celebrated it, challenging quietism, spurring rebellion toward democratic change. Before Facebook, Twitter, or TikTok, there was radical poetry, mural art, the musical Hair, Rodin, O'Keeffe, rock and roll, the image of the raised fist. American religious history describes Unitarianism as a rational religion in an evangelical sea of emotional excess. But too much rationalism, too much mind without body is out of balance. Our commitment to humanism has at times caused the body of our faith to go cold. The liberal part of our religion says we are open to change. Change is good, change is warm. And so we are blessed with the freedom of our faith to draw from life's abundance, to create right alongside of creation. And so I urge you to hear the call of art in whatever way it fits for you. Audre Lorde wrote, "Poetry is not a luxury." My father was an artist, a professional musician, singer, guitar player. He painted, he worked in stained glass, he built furniture, he was an athlete. Need I go on? He was a perfectionist, which made it really almost impossible to learn from him, to receive what might have been a broader artist's inheritance for myself. I didn't have to stay in just one lane. And in the pandemic year, I found myself surprised in an art class when I began to love to draw. So one more poem. This year, I began drawing this year on a small sketch pad, sometimes with pencil, sometimes with pen, rarely with color. Sticking to black and white, I learned how to shade my drawings, how to create tone and depth. Before now, I wrote using words to draw the pictures in my mind. Writing began to wear out, grind to a halt, the same words jumping on the page over and over. I started to draw, contour, crosshatch, shadowing, portrait, sumi brush. I used these new words to draw and was drawn in. My drawings surprised me. They are never finished. They are not clever. They don't yet touch the pictures in my mind. I can't tell what is true, what is outside, what is inside. But the words, the stories I've written my life with are used up. And so I perch precariously on this moment. Will I fall back? Will I fall forward? Will I remain stuck? Will a picture arrive with softness and depth enough to begin a new story? Where shall I look for it? In closing, there's an author I don't even know, didn't have time to look up, but it's from one of Annie Dillard's books.
Thank you.
And it's called Notes from a Bottle Found on the Beach at Carmel. It's not long. The legend of the traveler appears in every civilization, perpetually assuming new forms, afflictions, powers, and symbols. Through every age, he or she walks in utter solitude toward penance and redemption. Should I mark more than shining hours? I have agreed to paint a narrative on the city walls. I have now been at work many years. There is so much to be told. Every day is open for the artist to find their redemption, to mark their shining hours, to tell their story. Every day is a God. Who knew? You are an artist. I hope you know. May it be so. Amen. And now I invite you to sing together. Come sing a song with me, hymn number 346.
The mission of this church carries on in these times of transition and hope and is more important than ever. We are so grateful to have the financial support of members and friends. Please give as generously as you are able. This Sunday's offering can be received as indicated in the chat bar. You can make online donations through Breeze or by text, and you can still mail donations to the church office. David will now play Libertango by Astor Piazzolla.
Thank you, David. Beautifully done. Oh, what a lovely, lovely time we're having. I want to offer words of benediction about something that we are all experiencing, cicadas. I actually found a poem by E.B. White called Life. At 8 of a hot morning, the cicada speaks his first piece. He says of the world, heat. At 11 of the same day, still singing, he has not changed his note, but has enlarged his theme. He says of the morning, love. In the sultry middle of the afternoon, when the sadness of love and of heat has shaken him, his symphonic soul goes into the great movement and he says, death. But the thing isn't over. After supper, he weaves heat, love, death into a final stanza, subtler and less brassy than the others. He has one last heroic monosyllable at his command. Life, he says, reminiscing, life. And I invite us now into singing Spirit of Life together.
And now to extinguish the light. I'm going to try something different. This is a piece from Wendell Berry, which I like a lot. Who I like a lot. And it's called To Go in the Dark. To go in the dark with a light is to know the light. To know the dark, go without sight, and know that the dark too hums and sings with dark feet and dark wings. Enjoy.